Glasgow's quiet streets painted the picture of calm domestic life, neatly trimmed lawns, friendly neighbors, and houses where the lights went off at the same time each night. Among them stood the McCafferty home, a place that seemed to define suburban perfection. Cheryl and Harry McCafferty lived there, a couple everyone admired. Harry was a successful businessman, confident in every step, the kind of man who could command a room without saying much. Cheryl was his opposite, soft-spoken, polite, always dressed with a quiet elegance. Together, they looked like balance itself. To the outside world, their marriage was flawless. Neighbors often saw them attending church together, smiling for photos at social gatherings, or hosting dinner parties where Harry entertained guests with his humor and charm. Cheryl moved around gracefully, offering drinks and managing everything with a warm smile. People whispered, "They're such a perfect couple." But perfection can be a convincing disguise. Behind the closed doors of that beautiful home, a different story played out, one no one dared to imagine. Harry's charm, which dazzled the world, often turned into something dark when the doors shut and the guests were gone. He had a temper, sharp, unpredictable, and cruel. Small mistakes became reasons for anger. Sometimes it was about dinner being too cold, or the tone of Cheryl's voice. His rage wasn't always loud, sometimes it was quiet, calculated, the kind that left Cheryl shaking without him even raising a hand. Her friends occasionally noticed the change. A faded bruise near her wrist, a forced smile when someone asked how she was doing. "Just clumsy me," she'd laugh it off, eyes darting away. Harry's control deepened slowly, isolating her, limiting her calls, deciding who she could meet, and how she could spend money. It was control wrapped in the language of love. Each night at dinner, Cheryl sat across from him, pretending nothing was wrong, every bite heavy with unspoken fear. The ticking clock on the wall filled the silence between them. Outside, the world saw a marriage built on success and affection. Inside, it was a cage, beautiful, quiet, and suffocating. Cheryl smiled through it all, the perfect wife in a perfect home. But deep inside, something was breaking, a quiet voice whispering that perfection always comes at a cost. The days began to blur into one another. Morning light slipped through the curtains, but it brought no warmth, only the start of another day Cheryl had to survive. Her routine never changed: make breakfast, tidy the house, make sure Harry's clothes were ironed and his dinner ready exactly on time. Every sound in the house carried weight, even the creak of a floorboard made her heart race. She had learned to predict his moods, to read the subtle changes in his expression the moment he stepped through the door. Sometimes he came home in a good mood, smiling, calling her "darling," as if everything was normal. Other times, his eyes were cold, his voice sharp. Cheryl never knew what triggered it: a small comment, a misplaced object, the wrong tone of voice. His anger came without warning, and when it did, she froze. Over time, fear became a language she understood fluently. To the outside world, she was still the same Cheryl, well-dressed, polite, always smiling when she met neighbors or shopkeepers. People admired her grace, her patience, the way she always spoke kindly of her husband. But that smile was no longer real, it was armor. Behind it was exhaustion, the kind that lives deep in your bones when every day feels like a performance. Harry's cruelty didn't always leave bruises. It was in his words, his tone, the way he made her feel small. He told her she was lucky he stayed with her, that no one else would tolerate her, that she should be grateful for the life he provided. He'd take her phone, read her messages, and question every call. Slowly, Cheryl began to vanish, her laughter faded, her opinions disappeared, her world shrank to the four walls of their home. At night, she lay awake listening to his breathing beside her, wondering how her life had come to this. The fear wasn't just of what he might do, it was of who she had become. She no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. One cold evening, when Harry was out drinking with friends, Cheryl picked up the phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed a number she hadn't called in months, an old friend she trusted. When her friend answered, Cheryl's voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore," she said. There was silence on the other end, concern, confusion, helplessness. They talked for a few minutes, Cheryl crying quietly. But as soon as she heard the sound of Harry's car outside, she hung up, wiped her tears, and fixed her face in front of the mirror. The next morning, everything was the same. The breakfast was made, the smile was back, and Harry acted as if nothing had happened. But something inside Cheryl had changed. The fear that had once paralyzed her was now turning into something else, a quiet, growing desperation. Each day after that, she moved like a shadow through her own home, careful, quiet, waiting. The fear hadn't left her, but it had taken on a new shape, one that whispered a single truth: this couldn't go on forever. It was a bitterly cold night in March 2009. The wind howled outside the McCafferty home, rattling windows and shaking the bare trees in the quiet Glasgow suburb. Inside, the house appeared calm, silent, but the air was thick with tension, heavy and suffocating. Harry had been drinking, his movements unsteady, his words sharp and unpredictable. Cheryl sensed the storm brewing the moment he stepped through the door. What began as a disagreement escalated quickly. Voices, once hushed, turned into shouting, echoing against the walls. Harry's temper, always volatile, now felt uncontrollable. Cheryl tried to retreat, moving cautiously across the room, hands raised as if to shield herself. Her heart raced, each beat louder than the last, her mind spinning with panic. She later described the moment as pure terror, the kind that paralyzes even the strongest instincts. Harry cornered her near the kitchen table, his eyes blazing. Threats spilled from his mouth, each one sharper than the last. Cheryl said she feared for her life. In that blur of fear, confusion, and desperation, her mind made a single calculation: survival. And then, in a sudden, almost automatic motion, everything changed. Moments later, Harry lay on the floor, motionless. The shouting stopped. The house was plunged into an eerie, unnatural silence. Cheryl's hands shook violently, her breathing was shallow and rapid. Her mind couldn't process what had happened. Shock and disbelief twisted through her body. Time seemed suspended, each second stretching like a shadow across the room. After what felt like an eternity, Cheryl moved. She picked up the phone, her voice steady, eerily calm as she called for help. "My husband, he's dead," she said. "I think he took his own life." Her tone betrayed none of the panic she had just felt, as if she had rehearsed these words 1,000 times. But when the authorities arrived, subtle discrepancies began to surface. The scene didn't align with the story she had told. Blood patterns seemed inconsistent with suicide. The angle of Harry's body, the wounds, and the surrounding signs told a different story. Forensic experts began to suspect that what had appeared as a tragic act of self-destruction might, in fact, have been something far more deliberate. Questions hung in the air like smoke. How had this happened? What had triggered the final act? The McCafferty home, once a place of polished perfection, now bore the weight of suspicion. Each room, each piece of furniture, seemed to whisper secrets that Cheryl hadn't yet revealed. Neighbors, friends, and even family members struggled to reconcile the man they knew, charming, charismatic, in control, with the lifeless body that now lay at the center of an unfolding investigation. As detectives began to piece together the events leading to that night, one thing became clear: the story they had been told did not match the evidence. What looked like a private tragedy might, in reality, be the beginning of a case that would shock the entire community and redefine the quiet streets of Glasgow forever. In the days following Harry McCafferty's death, investigators returned to the house with a new purpose: to uncover the truth hidden behind Cheryl's carefully crafted story. Every corner, every surface, was examined. Blood spatter patterns, the angle of wounds, and the position of furniture all told a story that did not match the version Cheryl had offered. Forensic experts noted bruises inconsistent with an accidental struggle and small details that hinted at deliberate action. The timeline she provided had gaps, moments where no one could confirm her whereabouts, moments that would later prove critical. When Cheryl was brought into the police station, she maintained her composure at first. Calm, polite, almost rehearsed, she told officers that it had been an accident, a split-second panic. Hours of careful questioning followed. Detectives observed her closely, noting micro-expressions, shifts in tone, subtle pauses. As the hours stretched on, Cheryl's calm began to crack. Her voice trembled, her hands shook. Finally, in a quiet, tear-filled admission, she confessed. She said she hadn't intended to kill Harry, only to stop him from hurting her once more. Her confession opened a window into years of abuse. Cheryl described the controlling, humiliating environment she had lived in for more than a decade. The constant fear, the isolation, the way Harry had dominated every part of her life. She spoke of nights lying awake, listening to him return from work or social gatherings, wondering which version of him would emerge, the charming, affable husband or the violent, threatening man she had learned to fear. To Cheryl, the night of the incident was not an act of vengeance but one of survival, the desperate culmination of years spent under oppression. Prosecutors, however, painted a different picture. They argued that Cheryl's actions went beyond fear, framing them as a woman who had finally snapped, crossing a line from which there could be no return. They highlighted the premeditation suggested by her ability to call authorities and present a controlled narrative immediately afterward. Defense lawyers countered with psychological reports, describing the trauma and terror she had endured over the years, the long-term effects of sustained domestic abuse on mental and emotional health. The courtroom became a theater of conflicting narratives. Expert witnesses testified about battered spouse syndrome, the cumulative effect of psychological and physical abuse, and how it could drive a person to extreme measures. Friends and family shared their conflicting perspectives, some still seeing Cheryl as the charming, devoted woman they had known, others grappling with the shocking reality of her actions. Public opinion mirrored this division, debate spreading across media outlets and social circles. As the trial progressed, it became clear that this case was not just about a death in a home. It was about fear, survival, and the fragility of human endurance under prolonged abuse. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, revealed layers of trauma and desperation, forcing the community to confront uncomfortable truths. Cheryl's story, once hidden behind the illusion of a perfect marriage, was now laid bare, a complicated tale of pain, fear, and the blurred lines between victimhood and culpability. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Cheryl McCafferty stood before the judge, her posture tense yet composed. When the words, "guilty of manslaughter," echoed through the room, a strange calm seemed to settle over her. The court acknowledged the years of abuse, the terror she had endured, and the extreme distress that led to that fateful night. Yet, it could not fully excuse her actions. She had acted impulsively, crossing a line that even years of suffering could not legally justify. Cheryl's face remained pale, her expression unreadable. She did not cry, nor did she flinch at the murmurs in the packed courtroom. When asked for her statement, her voice was soft but steady. "I just wanted to survive," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of years spent in silence and fear. For the first time, her story, the daily terror, the isolation, the subtle horrors hidden behind closed doors, was laid bare for everyone to see. Outside the courtroom, the case ignited debates across Scotland. Discussions ranged from the responsibilities of law enforcement to detect domestic abuse, to the question of how far someone can be pushed before breaking. Some viewed Cheryl as a victim, a woman forced to take drastic action to save herself. Others questioned whether the law had struck the right balance between justice and compassion. The public grappled with uncomfortable questions: could a home, the place meant to be safest, become the most dangerous? Could fear and oppression ever justify taking a life? In the weeks that followed, Cheryl was transferred to prison. She adapted to the regimented life, moving quietly through her days. On one gray afternoon, she sat alone on a bench in the prison yard, eyes lifted to the overcast sky. Her face was empty, worn by years of trauma, but in the depth of those eyes, a flicker of peace lingered, a sense of calm after the storm, the quiet that comes after surviving chaos. A narrator's voice might echo over the final scene: sometimes, the most dangerous places aren't dark alleys, they're quiet homes where nobody hears the screams. The McCafferty case became more than a story of crime, it was a chilling reminder of the hidden horrors behind closed doors, of the human cost of long-term abuse, and of the fragile line between victim and perpetrator. Cheryl's life, forever altered, remained a cautionary tale for communities, law enforcement, and the public, a testament to the unseen struggles that can exist even in seemingly perfect homes.